Have you wondered about using Canon's RF lenses with your RED Komodo? Well, in this video, that's what we're going to be talking about. Welcome back, I'm Drake.
I'm Jesse.
And like we said earlier, we are talking about the RF lenses, specifically with the RED Komodo. And Canon was nice enough to send us these lenses to try out, so huge shout out to Canon for that. But let's dive in. We have 3 of them right in front of us, and
we have a lot of lenses in front of us. We have quite the plethora of
we have a lot of
options
toys
here,
right
but not all of these are RF. So,
but this was probably the most used lens out of all 3 of these, wouldn't you say?
I would say so. Yeah, absolutely.
This is the Canon. Back here, 24-105. Just like the old original version right there.
Is this it?
Yep, it has the stabilizer.
Yep.
And autofocus. You can see they're actually very, very similar in size there.
Yeah.
This is the version 1, the very first one, and that's the RF.
Yeah, one of the cool things is RF, if you don't know, is the newest version or with the newest mount. So they're pretty much redeveloping all their lenses with the RF mount, which offers additional contacts for more control, more data. Typically, an RF lens includes this new ring, which can be programmable.
Yep.
This one has a snap to it. I believe you can turn that off, and it can just kind of go endlessly. But it's also, they're all lighter. I don't know, all of them have been significantly lighter.
Slightly smaller. So, if you don't know, Canon developed these for their new mirrorless cameras, like the R5, R6, R3, those cameras. That's kind of what they started redesigning these lenses for. But the Komodo, made by RED, which is what we use a lot for broadcast and film work, also has the RF mount. The RF mount is really cool because unlike the EF mount, you can actually adapt things like PL to RF. The flange depth was not correct in the EF, so you couldn't adapt PL. So that's a really, really cool feature of the RF mount specifically. And the RED Komodo does allow programming of the ring just like Canon's RF cameras, which is super, super cool.
Yeah. Actually, in the latest firmware for the Komodo right now, it's the version 1.5.3, I think it is.
Probably,
it's 1.5.3, I believe. It actually enabled the programming of this lens, of the ring, which is a big deal. And what's amazing, so as an operator, one of the biggest things that we do at Bethel, because we shoot in 24, we get a lot of flicker issues with our LED walls and lights and whatnot. So we tend to put our shutter angle at 144. And
always.
Yeah.
It doesn't really ever change.
It really doesn't, unless we don't have LED. But because of that, we are limited in how we can change our exposure, pretty much only to either a variable ND or ISO. And so that's pretty much all we can do. Because
we want that shallow depth of field, so we try to run the lens as wide open as possible, which gives you that shallow depth of field.
Yeah, and also that's actually the secret weapon too, like how we keep the moire and all the junk off the LED screens, keeping the aperture wide open using nicer glass. Now, the other thing too with that is, we're handheld, and thumbing through the menu trying to adjust your ISO is really problematic.
Or even just having to tap the screen and slide. It's like, the screen isn't that nice. It's not an iPhone.
Especially for a stage cam operator. And I will say the Komodo's dynamic range is amazing. We rarely have to change it, and we typically just have to pop an ND filter on or off, and that's really all the adjustment that we have to do. But having the ability to eliminate a menu and be able to program it onto a ring is pretty. That's pretty much a game changer.
Wait, listen to
that. So that's one of the things that I've been most excited about with these. And this 24-105 is very much, it feels and responds just like the old one. Except it is lighter and it is sharper.
The auto IS works on the RF model versus on the EF model on the Komodo for whatever reason.
Yeah.
The stabilizer still doesn't work, so having that IS in that lens was
and that's one of the
nice.
issues with DSLR glasses. They don't always the IS and stuff doesn't always work. That could be with the Komodo or even an Ursa.
Yeah.
There's a lot of variables, but DSLR glass does not always is not always supported 100%.
Correct.
So something to consider. But this is a 24-105. This is a fantastic lens. It is still 4.0, so there's no spec changes on this, but there is a noticeable clarity difference. It is sharper. It is a little lighter. It's still an affordable lens for what it is. I think it's $800-ish bucks. I think for this.
Yeah, it's $1,000 or less.
It's less than $1,000. And one of the things I've noticed is the way that it handles color. There's less chromatic
aberration.
Yes, this does handle that better. And so across the RF line, there is an improvement there. One thing is, while we like aperture to be wide open, 4.0 at 105 is quite.
Yeah, it has a
zoom.
lot of compression at the end of that lens still.
You'll see this lens a lot on our keys position because it offers us both a wide and a tight, and we like to be able to get the varied focal lengths to keep the variety. And so this is by far one of the most useful lenses. Understanding how to use your zoom and that aperture to your advantage is a really big deal.
Definitely one of the most used lenses.
And the IS is so good that it really stabilizes even the newest of operators. So
You're right.
Anyway, let's move on to the other lens because while we love this was a great camera lens. We have more to say about these things.
Well, so technically, I guess this is the upgrade of that lens. This is the
by a couple pounds too. So,
yeah, literally. This is the 28-70 2.0. So they also have a 24-70 2.8, which is right in between these two. This thing is heavy as all get out. It's a monster of a lens. Gorgeous though. I mean, the amount of glass there is pretty nuts. This thing is insane.
88, right? Or 80.
95 millimeters.
95.
This is a big
More than
boy.
I thought. Same control ring. It doesn't have IS.
Nope. But it is a 2.0. Yeah. But it is a 2.0 lens, and so the depth of field that you get out of this, is insane. F2 at 70 millimeters.
It looks gorgeous.
Nuts.
I think because the optics are so large. I mean, it's bringing in light in a different way, and it's you put this next to a 24-70, and I don't know how to explain it other than the sharpness. It's magic.
Yep, exactly.
It literally is this sense of 3D on your screen, and it's really stunning what it can do. And you don't know what it is. You just know it's there, and it's a really, really interesting thing. It's hard to do a whole worship set with this lens. If I really want this lens and I really want to use it all the time, it's just a beast.
Well, and so that's probably what I would say the one con of that lens is it's so heavy that it looks insane. It's just using it for 2 hours handheld is a lot. So that's my one con with that, which for handheld use, I'd probably end up getting the 24-70 at 2.8 just because it's lighter than this, smaller and lighter than this lens. Even though this lens is gorgeous, that would be my one.
Yeah.
If
you're doing a lot of stuff on sticks, like interviews or whatnot, I would enthusiastically recommend this. This is absolutely gorgeous. Maybe not the best stage cam lens, but for everything else, this thing is absolutely fantastic.
Yeah. That's a monster. It's as big as the camera, if not bigger. Lastly, we got this guy, which is the RF 70-200 2.8. They also make an f4 model, just like the old 70-200s. They had a f4 and a 2.8 model.
This is almost a pound lighter than version 2.
Than the old one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't that nuts? It's significantly lighter.
It's a lot smaller. It does extend out. Unlike the old ones where it was all enclosed. It has 3 modes of IS. Yeah, I mean, I didn't get to spend a ton of time with this, but the image quality, just like all the other RF lenses, I found is just insanely sharp. It's really, really crystal clear and sharp. And I mean, this is a lot easier to carry around with you all the time.
Yeah, I think so. This lens is actually quite an upgrade, in my opinion. We've used and abused our older ones, and they're pretty beat up, but they're really good workhorses. This lens is significantly lighter. The build quality still feels really good, and it's interesting that all of these RF lenses, spec-wise, are the same, but they do look sharper. They do handle color different, and in fact, our guys are so used to looking at the camera and seeing it a certain way, and they would look at the screen, and at first they thought that they were flatter or more desaturated. And they didn't like them at first, to be honest. Like, nobody liked them at first. On the receiving end, though, by the time it went through the compression and all of our processing, on the other end, it was really, really sharp. You could see the clarity. And, everybody knows that with lenses, there's always a coloring that happens. Every lens colors your image a bit.
Yep.
And using DSLR glass, you're going to see that even more so because it's not, broadcast or cinema grade glass. And we're so used to using DSLR budget stuff, getting a certain look, that I think when we switched to these, Canon did such a great job improving the optics, really just future proofing, that it really made the clarity difference, really changed. I don't think it reinvented Canon.
No.
But it did shift, like lens flares and the familiar look and the blooming that would happen. It did shift all of that, including the color. And at first that can be a little off-putting, but honestly it means that across the board you're getting something that's closer to a cinema grade glass. You're seeing this bump up. And now as a creative, you're able to make more creative decisions. Your lens isn't shaping your color, you are. And I think that's a big distinction.
Yeah. I think that is really true. You are starting to get a little bit more closer to like these guys in a smaller package that is still portable. Like, you can still work on your mirrorless camera. That's the nice thing with these, is like if you're going with a Komodo and you want an R5, you have interchangeable lenses, which is also a huge benefit. But I think that...
And we always talk about glass. I mean, glass is like the biggest investment, and it's something you really care about.
Absolutely.
And it's just hard. It's hard to invest a lot in when you're trying to stretch and future-proof. Trying to stretch your dollar and future-proof.
So there's a lot more electronics in here than the old ones, just because of the... Like, everything's fully digital. The focus wheel, if the camera's not on, you can't actually focus the camera. If they don't have Canon's control data, it won't focus the camera. So it's not a manual focus per se. It's actually all electronic. So there's a lot more electronics, but the build quality is still your standard Canon trustworthy build quality of lenses, as we've grown to know and love, and it still produces the beautiful color that we all love, which is why we still use Canon lenses.
Yeah, I think the upgrades were necessary, in my opinion. I think while I love all the older L series, I think the upgrades are timely to what's modern and current.
Yep.
I remember in the early days we would almost prefer the DSLR over everything else because it had a certain texture, and it definitely, there was this quality of Canon L glass that was different than the rest.
Yep.
And that's actually what kept us with Canon for so long.
And why we still have this and still use this. I mean...
Yeah. But to have something that's really catering to a more cinematic and really a more technically advanced viewer these days, this was a really, really good upgrade. Really solid upgrade. And I think the little frustrations we have with like focus pulling and whatnot, I think will only get better as we support the lenses better.
Well, and that's the beauty of the electronicness, is that this is firmware updates are a real thing. So
it's a real thing.
I do think that they are just going to get better even as is, like without changing to another lens, this lens is going to get better, which is really cool.
So if I had to choose today to buy an RF 70 to 200 or an EF 70 to 200,
and I had modern cameras.
yeah, I you know, as much as I love that muscle memory, I'm going to buy an RF. Because that's what everyone really wants to know watching this. Like, should we buy RF or do we get an EF?
Yep. I would highly recommend, if your camera bodies support RF lenses, I would highly recommend these lenses
native,
right here. Just go native. I mean, we're shooting this on an EOS R. Komodo takes the RF lenses. The only thing that doesn't is the REDs. But honestly, with the bigger REDs, we're going to be moving into the PL territory anyways.
PL, and they're going to, even if they're adapted, they're going to be typically on sticks or something. Something with a support system. And so that's really not a big deal. But I would also say, like, if you're a church and you have to make very, very strategic purchases, you know, your DSLR lineup is going to work great for your DSLR camera body and your video, so you can take it on and off stage and use it in other places. So I think for the ecosystem, Canon really still is leading the way. I think some of the competitors of Canon out there, their glass just isn't at the same level. And that's still true.
Not quite,
and they're getting better, but it's just never been there.
Nope.
For us, the character, the texture, the color, the flares,
and the quality of like physical
and lens
quality.
build quality, I think Canon still wins for most everything that we're doing. So everything, I think anything beyond this is specialty. And so really weird. I'm not really like a brand loyalist.
No, but I mean, the only non-Canon lenses that I own are old, vintage lenses, and that I bought those for specific looks. Everything else is Canon, so
yeah,
I'm sold.
All right, well, hopefully that's helpful in choosing which lens you should buy, or if you should buy an RF lens. And it gives you a little bit of insight on how we're interacting with it and some of our pros and cons.
How we're using it in a cinema environment.
In a live stage environment. So,
if you have more questions, drop them in the comments below and make sure to hit subscribe.
Thanks, guys.